Welcome to the LEC post-game lobby, and after G2 dominated their arch rivals Fnatic, we have grabbed the coach, Mr. Dylan Falco, to pick his brains on all things League of Legends. That's what we do here. It's quite simple at the LEC. My name is Frankie. I am joined by the fabulous Vedi and as the aforementioned Mr. Falco. After that matchup, you must be feeling pretty darn pleased with yourself, because everything you wanted to achieve, you clearly did. With that draft, the speed of the game, it was pretty easy for you guys.
Yeah, I think we came in today with the plan of drafting and playing very aggressively. There's been a lot of talk about our early games, and it's true, right? A lot of our early games have been going poorly. But I think with Draven blind, counterpick support, really strong combos and engage with Sejuani, it allowed us to, I feel like, have complete control over the game from the start. I think there is a version of this game, right, where Fnatic outscales us or maybe outranges us, and it can get hard. But I feel like if we play well, it definitely would be in our hands.
I think when we think about G2 historically, one of the things that I always get drawn to is that mid-jungle support synergy, right? And I always think about back in the day, it used to be like Mickey Yankos, now it's Targamas Yankos, and how they enable Caps, and then Caps uses that pressure to then impact the rest of the map. What do you think has been some of the struggles that you've had when it comes to actually playing through the early game with this roster, with the meta? What do you think has really stood out and made it difficult for you?
I think a few things. I think one is just communication aspect. I think we worked on it a lot, especially out of our bot lane, about coordinating on the waves and stuff like this. They're newer players and weren't as used to playing these sorts of very aggressive comps and play styles. And then I also think that there are versions of the game where we can put a lot into mid and we can put a lot of resources into mid. And I think champs like Sylas, for example, are great for that. But there are also games where we can't do that. And in those games, maybe it has been a bit harder for us.
That's fair.
How did you therefore prep your bot lane mentally for this game? Because, I mean, it's Fnatic. It's a big challenge ahead of them.
I think this week we had a really insane week of scrims. And we practiced quite a bit of Draven. And it's actually one of FLICKR's most played all time favorite champions. We busted it out, I think, one game this split, and it went and I think it did one of the least damage in the game, and it was it was really bad. But we knew he was insane Draven, and we know we could make a very good case. I think it also helped that Fnatic drafted a bit, I would say, afraid against the Draven. The way they Ezreal or Rakan, it's kind of a weak response. So yeah, I think it was actually comfort for us.
They gave you so much space, and you looked incredibly comfortable with it. Tell me what you thought about the Jarvan in the top lane, though.
We've seen a few Jarvan top lanes. I think Jarvan got a small buff on the last patch. I also think in this game, we banned Ornn first 3, we picked Sejuani, and then on 4-5, we banned, Shyvana and Gragas, which are the 2 other comfort picks for Wonder. So I thought maybe he was a bit deep in the champion pool department. So I think that that's another reason why I came out. Jarvan also good against Draven, right? A mobile 80 carry. Our Draven did by Gale Force in this game to kind of counteract it. But I guess that's why. I don't think it's the greatest pick, though.
I think also one of the things is with the changes to Resolve and the Gnar and GP nerfs, I've heard that AoE champions top lane have also just become stronger. So I know Kennen, especially over in the LPL, we saw Kennen yesterday as well, has risen in priority. I also thought that the Jarvan with the areas we saw today might be another thing that's kind of come out and teams have been practicing. But I do agree with Dylan that in this matchup in particular, I don't see what it does really into Sejuani. I felt like that Broken Blade was mostly just chilling, and in terms of frontline and engage, it can make sense. But yeah, I wasn't sold on the pick either.
Well, we spoke about the bot lane earlier, and it is my pleasure and privilege to say that our Kia player of the game was FLICKR with a whopping 45% of the votes for that Draven performance. And clearly, things were speeding ahead in the game. And guess what? They're speeding ahead in the race for playoffs too. Really, it's never been closer here on the LEC, with only the Mad Lions locked in for playoffs. So in any tiebreaker scenario they could face, they are automatically resolved by tiebreaker rules. So we're going to take a look at the percentage scenarios of which teams can qualify for playoffs. If you look to your left there, Mr. Dylan Falco, you can see them. A 7-way tie at 10-8 is still possible, Vedi.
Yeah. So again, just to remind viewers at home, this isn't the percentage chance, it's the percentage of scenarios where these teams will qualify. So however many scenarios, whether it be 10 scenarios or 10,000 scenarios or however many, these are the number of them where the teams are likely to qualify. So you can see for G2, after beating Fnatic, your position is pretty good. It's like the Avengers scene, you know, like how many scenarios do we beat Thanos? It's not one for G2, it's like a lot of them. So things are looking pretty good and pretty favorable. How are you feeling about your chances based on the current state of the league and looking forward to playoffs?
At least for us, it would be really great. I think in most scenarios that we perform better than Rogue this season, the championship points will bring us to first seed, and we qualify for Worlds to get first seed for playoffs. That's what we want now. We're like in full try-hard mode. We want to win as many games as possible, and then just hopefully just like secure our Worlds and playoff berth, I would say.
So what do you think about the state of the league right now? Because there's, well, we were not expecting the results to happen today. Like Vitality lost, Rogue lost. I mean, I don't think I think you and Fnatic are pretty comparable, so I wouldn't say there was an upset, but we've seen a lot of upsets recently, and the league seems to not make much sense.
So I think the game right now is very explosive. I think there's a lot of ability for teams to kind of get ahead in snowball games. I also think with a lot of like fighting champions and aggressive champions, there's also a lot of ability for drafts to go very, very poorly.
Right.
And I think when teams kind of get in a bad string of drafts and a bad string of plays, it becomes easy to go on loss streaks. And I think because in Europe, there's like, 7, 8, 9 strong rosters in the league, you just have these things where these teams just go on loss streaks for 2 or 3 weeks before they figure things out. And it has led to, like, every team just has their time. Like, we had our time, we were doing poorly. Fnatic has their time, they're doing poorly. And then at the end, you just get crazy standings like this.
So one thing we were talking about today was the first 3 games were Ornn, Sylas, Twitch. And I was like, maybe, because we've had this happen before where the patch seems like that it is very early game focused, but then on stage, teams just can't do it. And like, you've probably had a lot of experience where you have these early game teams and we're like, we're ready to bring this on stage, and they get on stage and they don't do it. Like, how much do you think that is happening to Europe right now, where the early game is the best way to play, but people are just defaulting to the Ornn, the scaling, the team fighting, because that's just what they feel most comfortable with?
I don't see it as much as like early game, as much as I see it as activity. Because I think a champ like Ornn, until people find like really insane counter picks, can still team fight really well at Herald, make a lot of active plays, like roam, team fight, do a lot of stuff. Like, I don't feel like it's like you're playing this champ to hit level 17 and have
That's
5
fair, yeah.
Ornn items. I feel like a lot of the reason, for example, these champs are being played is just to be strong in team fights and at Herald fights and Dragon fights. And I don't think that has to be like a slow game necessarily.
For sure. That's fair.
You mentioned about teams having their weeks. Mad has not necessarily been the best showing for them in week 7, and they're your next opponent. So I believe you've got Mad, Misfits, and SK all in Super Week. So it might not be Mad that's your first team, but you are certainly going to be playing them quite soon. Tell me what you think about how teams are managing to kind of, I guess, work out how to play against them now. Is that something you feel quite confident in doing next week?
As for Mad Lions, I think they've had really good drafts, actually, this whole split. I think they were really fast on how to draft around a lot of the active mid-jungle combos. I think they were camping mid a lot. Niski was being really active on the map. But I do think I never felt like gameplay and skill-wise, they were like that much ahead of everyone else. I felt like all the other rosters were always taking games every week or two. They drop a game, stuff like that, right? And as you can see right now, they're only, one match ahead. So I feel like it's more about the plans and what other teams can kind of bring.
I think that's fair. And I think that when you look at Mad, to me, I always hate saying that they've been figured out, but one of the revolutionary things that they were doing was that red buff ward that no one else was doing. And then over the weeks, we started seeing teams like stack up around reds to counter the red ward, and then new wards were coming up. But it feels like that Mad found a method that was very effective that enabled them to get early leads. And now the other teams, to me, feel like they've caught up. And already we saw from G2 today, you put a lot of emphasis onto your early game this week, had a very strong early game. Rogue managed to shut down their early game yesterday. And it feels like that Europe is putting a lot more emphasis on being a good early game region, and I think that LPL probably has something to do with it. But I think that single strength that Mad had now isn't enough to separate them from the pack. So it's a question of how quickly can they evolve to keep ahead of the rest of the competition.
So preparing for next week's 3 games, Mad, Misfits, SK, which one do you have to do the most prep for?
I think Mad Lions is definitely the strongest of the 3 teams. They're first place, right? And I think it's very important that, like Vedius said, like that the early game goes well, and that we have a good plan. So yeah, I would say them. So
I had one question that I wanted to ask, because normally when we look at the league like this and the state of it, fans obviously get very worried when it comes to international performance. And fortunately, for those that don't know, Dylan has quite a few Worlds appearances. But you've been in situations like this where either your team is struggling or the league looks kind of weak, but then we go to international events and our showing really isn't that bad. So can you talk a little bit about what you think about the current state of the league and why right now doesn't necessarily matter to what is happening in the future?
So if anything, I think from spring to summer, the teams got stronger. I think the reason the standings are like this is teams like XL and teams like Mad Lions made big upgrades coming to summer split, which just makes it closer. I also think that we're kind of ramping up, and we're at a point now where I feel like we are starting to become a bit ahead or a bit stronger than a lot of the other teams as well. And we went to MSI, right? We played a lot of these international teams, and definitely they were strong, right? Like we got stomped by T1 in MSI semis, but we also scrimmed a lot of the other Asian teams, and I definitely feel like it's something that the top European teams can compete with, for sure, especially with creative drafts and good early games, I would say.
And I also think that when we think about international competition, the regular season happens, the playoffs happen, and then there's like a 2-month break, right? And you guys take a bit of a break, but you're almost immediately back on the scrim hype. Like you guys go to Korea to boot camp like a month in advance. Is that normally when you go?
I think it's actually pretty quick this year between playoffs and Worlds. Actually,
so you guys are already
fast,
starting to scrim. And from my experience, that's where most of the growth for international competition actually happens, right?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of prep time where the patch is completely new and you can learn new things and the teams fundamentally change, right? Teams that look strong get weak. Teams that are weak become strong. And also there just is this element that the nerves and pressure on a big stage, like in front of a crowd with world championships, everything kind of changes for some teams, right? Like just crazy stuff always happens.
That's fair. Yeah. So I basically wanted to try and show fans that they shouldn't be too scared, even though the league looks like a bit of a mess. I have faith in Dylan and the rest of the European teams that come into national events. We're going to pop off.
You sure you're not a bit scared?
No,
After all the
not at
upsets
all.
we've had this weekend?
Not at all.
Sure?
If anything, it proves to me that upsets can happen against the international teams, and Gen G should be sweating right now.
What I've learned this weekend is G2 is inevitable. But next week, we are going to be seeing the end of our race to crown the champion of our regular season Kia Player of the Game leaderboard. So we should check in with who's topping the tables right now. Chachi got I think his first of the split today, so sadly not on the leaderboard, but at the top, Perks, Niski, Vatera. It's all about the mid laners.
It's a lot of mid laners, yeah.
Weirdly enough, there's no caps on there. You guys do have 9 wins. Do you think that... I mean, what do you think of Caps' split overall, actually? Because I was someone that was quite critical of him for the first half of the split, where I felt like that compared to his playoffs, the level of play that we saw from him wasn't quite to that standard. Maybe that's unfair because his standard was super high in playoffs. What do you think?
Without saying too much, from talking to him this week about his approach to the game and seeing him play in the last week or so, I think he's kind of ramping up towards playoffs. I think he definitely did die a lot this split. There was a lot of very high death games. I also think there was a lot of games where we also weren't playing that well around mid and didn't have a lot of priority. And he was playing like immobile picks where we lost early game and he was just getting camped by like 3 people. And that was like our fault as a team as well. So
it's
I think
coach's
it's
fault
fine.
that he's not on the leaderboard, basically.
Yeah, I'll take it for that.
Oh, well. Next week is going to be our final Super Week with matches on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So let's take a look at Friday's schedule. So you will be playing Mad Lions.
Yep.
Yeah, you sounded so surprised when I said that earlier. Like, we're playing these guys. And then we've got, as I mentioned later on, you guys are going to be playing Misfits. And then you'll be ending the season with SK.
So, Dylan, I'm just really curious, based on next week, because obviously we saw a lot of upsets this week. So let's say right now, we've got the teams at 9 wins. So there's Vitality, Rogue, you, and then there's Mad. So that means there's 2 spots left. So who takes the last 2 spots for playoffs?
I think that, wait, who are we leaving out? I think Fnatic
So
will
XL, there's Fnatic, there's Astralis that find themselves at 7 wins as well.
Okay, I think Astralis and XL will not make it. So I'm not sure what...
I see.
That's what I would say.
So that would mean that Fnatic would secure a spot.
Just because even though Fnatic had a really bad game today, I think like they really like, from scouting them, they solidified their plans and like they're just playing really solid team comps and trying to rely on just like player skill and just like playing solid, and I think they can kind of squeeze it out. Whereas XL, it looks a bit more sketchy. I think they lost, to BDS today, right?
Yeah.
And they're on a bit of a loss streak, and in the draft department, it looks not that good when I watch their games.
Fair.
So Obviously, at this point, lots of different things can happen, but if I were to guess, that's what I'd say.
Damn. Yeah, to me, I kind of feel like XL plateaued almost. You know, they came into the season really strong, but then the level of improvement relative to the other teams just hasn't been the same. But I thought based on their schedule that they'd be guaranteed because they had BDS, Astralis, and SK, the bottom 3 teams. But then after their loss today...
Yeah, they're really sweating after that loss, for sure.
It's a scary road for XL for sure. So there's the team to watch next week because what was a shoe-in, I think, is now a much shakier road.
Would you say every game counts?
I would say hashtag every game counts.
Yeah, I was forced to say that. And because I was asked by producer Deppa rather than Vedi to say it, I had to say it. Because technically he gets to decide whether I
She's
come
lying.
back or not. All right. That does it for us here in the NEC studios. Thank you so much for joining us, Dylan.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for putting up with me, Vedi.
It's been a pleasure, Frankie. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. It's been lovely, to be perfectly honest with you.
It's been lovely, babes.
It's been lovely, babes. I'm not allowed to try and take a selfie today because, I've been asked selfie redemption. I'm not going to, you know what I did?
You brought your phone.
I brought a little phone. So if you are itching for more League of Legends, then you are in luck, by the way, because the LCS is live right now for Golden Guardians versus 100 Thieves. But obviously, stay tuned for the next 30 seconds to see if I can actually take a selfie. We're going to see you next week on Friday for our final 3 days of the regular season. The Queen is going to be back. Shots will be in this seat, but I've kept it warm for you, love. Good night.
Right. Nice. Bye-bye. So, it all boils down to this. 2 teams that are head-to-head in the standings. A regular season game that typically doesn't have much impact could determine the rest of the year for both of these teams.
Today, G2 and Fnatic are set to clash again, but this time far from the top spots they're used to.
For the longest time, Fnatic and G2 have tried to drown their demons, but they've managed to stay afloat.
The history between these teams has been long.
And this close to playoffs, there is no room for mistakes for either of them.
However, throughout the history of the LEC, neither organization has ever missed a playoffs appearance. History is often written by the winner. So without further ado, let's find out who will write the next chapter as it's time for Fnatic versus G2.
LeBron gets taken down, the corner of the Forge God will find his man! Sniped by the GOAT! Flash forward from Haru, applies the buff, knocked up into the air, down to 200 HP. Dale goes forward and LeBron joins the fray. Ignite is available to him, puts it down, and the burn should secure it, but it may not matter. LeBron escapes with his life. The initiation, Haru forced to use that flag and dragon. Kazi snipes Younghoon. Meganar is charging up. Nuburit looking for that charm. The cracks are going to be annoying, are going to be until he finds it. Popped! Immediately sent to the fountain.
Oh, but right into the Aussie.
Oh, he's going to get out. Can Marite Ward and W him? Yes, he is. Oh, so close.
Well, has to block the chain. He's also a level down. The rest of the team now on the way. Hillesang coming in. Can they try to turn this one? Fnatic, this is definitely not the fight that they were looking for.
FLICKR to stack the wave. Hillesang really low HP. Flash ulto.
Flash in the auto. The cash in. Upset. FLICKR and Targamas. The other FLICKR and Targamas. They're in no man's land. They're not a part of this fight. Humanoid now running. But Cap still takes down Upset. The Zanyas, he buys time. FLICKR. Another cash out. G2 taking down Fnatic in a storied rivalry.
I love your socks, by the way.
Thank you very much. They're not mine.